Never save money. My grandfather gave me this advice, and that is why I will share it with you. Look, a long time ago in the fields of Texas around the 1950s lived a grandfather whom everyone knew as lazy. It wasn't that he worked from time to time. It wasn't that he never worked. You would always find him under the shade of a mesquite tree, sitting on an old chair, staring into the horizon. With his hands, he scratched his beard, and with his mouth, he never stopped talking about business he would never do. He would say, "One day, I'm going to open a store. You'll see. Another day, I'm going to buy land. I'll have cows. I'll make money without getting tired." But that day never came. People didn't even laugh anymore. They looked at him with pity. They said, "He's a vague dreamer," and they were right. The grandmother, tired of hearing the same thing, sighed loudly so that even the wind could hear her. "Old man, life is not sustained by dreams. It is sustained by work." The grandfather raised his eyebrows, shrugged his shoulders, and always answered the same way, "We'll see, woman. One day I will find a way." And again, silence. Again, promises carried in the air. Years passed, and the only thing that grew was need. One night, the grandson, a boy with big eyes and bare feet, asked for bread. The grandmother opened the pantry, nothing, empty like their worries. The grandfather looked down, feeling the words stuck in his throat. There was no excuse. His ideas could not be eaten. Those dreams did not fill stomachs. That night, he did not sleep. The next morning, defeated, he did what he had always despised and worked as a day laborer in the cotton fields. The change was hard, very hard. From spending hours under a tree, he went to bending under the burning sun. From having soft hands, he went to having them blistered open. His back hurt. His legs trembled, every muscle burned down to the bone, and in the middle of the field, with sweat dripping into his eyes, he murmured, "This is worse than it seems. This is a chain." At night, he would arrive home, bent over, as if he were 20 years older. The grandmother waited for him with a plate of beans and 2 tortillas, never 3. The grandson ran toward the wooden house's porch and hugged him, asking with his usual innocence, "What did they give you, grandfather?" The old man took out the check, looked at it for a long time as if searching for more than ink inside it, and answered tiredly, "It's little, son, but something is something." And with that, they went to the village store. He paid old debts, left some money for taxes, bought the grandmother's medicine, then the usual, a small bag of corn, beans, cheap coffee, and when possible, sugar. And on the way back, in his pocket, only a few loose coins remained. The grandson took them out, lined them up on the table, counted them with his fingers, and said, "That's all that's left." The grandfather pressed his lips. "It is nothing more." And so time passed. The check arrived, the check left, and the house continued leaking. The debt was a number that never moved. The grandfather felt he worked only to breathe another day. One afternoon at the store, he heard men speaking loudly as if preaching, "The secret is to save." The one who keeps something aside always has something. Those words kept buzzing in his mind. That same evening, he looked for a large glass jar, washed it, dried it on his pants, held it up to the lamplight, and hid it under the bed. Every week, after buying only what was necessary, he threw in a few coins or a crumpled bill. The sound of metal falling, ting, ting, seemed like music. Each time he heard it, he felt the future growing inside it. The grandson discovered it one afternoon, lifted the blanket, and saw the jar half full. "What are you doing, grandfather?" The old man smiled proudly like a mischievous child showing his treasure. "I'm keeping our tomorrow." But that tomorrow was expensive, very expensive. The grandfather refused to buy new boots, even though his were already opening at the tip. He walked with his toes touching the ground and said, "These will last another month." Rain came through the kitchen roof, wet the table, filled the bucket with dirty water. He looked at the leak and said, "This roof will last another rain." At the table, there was less and less bread, less meat, almost no milk. The boy ate slowly to fool his hunger. The grandmother looked at him, then looked at the grandfather, and one day she could no longer stay silent. "Old man, what is the use of saving so much if we are hungry?" He did not lift his eyes. He continued dropping a coin into the jar. "It's for our good. One day you will understand." Many months passed, and then more months after that. The jar filled with crumpled bills and coins of all sizes. The grandfather took it out on certain nights, kissed it almost as if it were a son, looked at it under the trembling lamplight, and smiled. It felt to him like a chest of gold. One night, he placed it on the table. Proud, he called the grandson. "Look, son, here is security." The boy's eyes widened. "How many bags of corn can we buy with this?" The grandfather lifted his chin toward him. "3, maybe 4. With this, we will never lack food." And he began to laugh. The grandson laughed too, trusting his grandfather. The grandmother silently watched them from the side, her heart tight. The next day, they went to the market. The grandfather walked slowly, but in his heart he carried a spark of pride. He carried the jar under his arm, wrapped in an old cloth. The grandson jumped beside him and asked over and over, "How many bags will we bring back, grandfather? 3 or 4? The grandfather smiled confidently, even though his torn boots made noise at every step. "Yes, son, today we will return with full bags. Today you will see what security is." They reached the merchant's stall. The grandfather carefully placed the bills and coins on the table. He spread them out proudly, like someone showing a treasure. 3 bags of corn, please." The man counted them quickly, with the agile fingers of someone who sees money every day. He looked up and, without an ounce of emotion, said, "This won't do, old man. Prices have gone up. With this, you barely get 1.5 bags. The grandfather widened his eyes, incredulous, as if he had not heard correctly. "How is that possible?" The merchant shrugged. "Money is worth less every day. That's how things are." The grandson looked at the grandfather, confused, his voice trembling. "So the jar has shrunk?" The grandfather felt a blow in his chest, as if life itself had abandoned him. The merchant, with a sharp gesture, dragged toward him one large sack and another half-full one. Then, without really looking at him, he put a few coins and 2 crumpled bills into the box that served as the jar and gave it back. "That's all it gave, old man," he said coldly, like someone dropping an unimportant truth. The grandfather lowered his head, took the full sack first, then the half one, and finally grabbed the box with the miserable change. The grandson watched him in silence, his eyes full of questions. And so, with his hands full and his heart empty, he walked back home. Each step the grandfather took was heavier than the last. That night, at the kitchen table, he emptied the box. The coins and bills fell one by one, dry like dead stones. He counted them with hope. He counted them again and again, as if suddenly they would multiply. But they were always the same. What had once seemed like wealth was now just a useless pile, unable to buy even a full sack. The grandfather hit the table in anger. So much effort, so many sacrifices, only for everything to turn into dust. The grandmother, her face tired, looked at him in silence. She said nothing because she had already said everything before. The grandson, with a soft voice, asked, "Should we stop saving, grandfather?" The old man could not answer. He stood up, dragging his feet, and went out to the porch. There he sat under the dark night. The cold wind blew between the trees, and he wrapped his arms around himself like a lost child. He thought that maybe his whole life had been a mistake, appearing strong before, failing after, and now being mocked by money. For the first time, he felt there was no way out. The following days were bitter. In the fields, he no longer had strength. He could barely fill a sack of cotton, and the boss looked at him with contempt. At home, food was running out more and more. The grandmother coughed at night, and the grandson looked at him with hunger in his eyes. The grandfather felt a weight on his chest crushing him, and at times he thought about giving up entirely, letting himself fall and never getting up again. But one morning, sitting on the porch with a lost gaze, he saw a neighbor pass by. He carried a basket full of clean white eggs, neatly arranged. He walked toward the village with a firm step, smiling like a confident man. Later, another passed, carrying bottles of fresh milk. The sound of glass clinking could be heard as he walked. He too seemed unconcerned. Neither of them carried a check or a hidden jar. They carried things that served, things that produced every day. The grandfather watched them for a long time, tightening his lips with a mix of envy and sadness. And then, like an echo from far away, he remembered the voice of his grandson. What if, instead of saving money, we bought chickens? At first, the idea had seemed like a child's foolishness. But now, in the darkness of his heart, it shone like a lit spark. He did not think much more. He opened the jar and gathered what little remained. He collected the coins, the crumpled bills, everything that still had any use. He went to the market with his head down, asked with an unsure voice, and, after bargaining poorly as always, he returned with a few thin, ugly, nervous hens. When he arrived home, he released them into the yard. The grandson clapped his hands, moved, running after them. "Now, yes, grandfather, we have an egg factory." The grandfather saw him smile, and for the first time in a long while, felt a light inside his heart. During the first days, he gathered barely 1 or 2 eggs. The grandmother cooked them carefully, dividing them into 3 as if they were a treasure. When one was left, he sold it to a neighbor who gave them a few coins. With that money, they bought another, larger hen. The grandfather began to keep an old notebook. He wrote crookedly. He made mistakes in the accounts, but he recorded every egg, every sale. He felt that at last he was doing something clean and honest. Little by little, the yard filled with cackling. The grandson chased the hens, and the grandmother collected the eggs in a basket. The neighbors began to come. "Old man, sell me a dozen. Will you have more for tomorrow?" The grandfather, who before knew only the check and the jar, now counted the eggs, calculated, negotiated awkwardly but proudly. Work was no longer a chain. It was a clean fruit. One afternoon, While holding an egg in his hand, he looked at it like someone looking at a miracle. He called his grandson and spoke in a firm voice. "This is worth more than a jar full of bills, because this feeds, multiplies, and never loses its value. Saved money dies, but if you make it produce, you will always have something on the table." The boy hugged him with a smile. "Then you are no longer lazy, grandfather?" The old man held him against his chest with tears in his eyes. "No, son. I have learned that laziness and dead saving lead to the same place, to nothingness. Since then, the jar remained forgotten under the bed, empty, like old illusions. When someone in the village spoke about saving, the grandfather answered calmly and wisely, pointing to the yard full of hens. Saving money is like holding water in your hands. It always escapes. Make it work, even if you start with just one hen, because only then does life truly bloom. And that is how, in those Texas fields, the man everyone called lazy became the one who discovered the greatest truth: never save money.